Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're back with another Right and Reviewed. And today we are doing the another, I guess, kind of underground metalcore titan of the mid 2000s. Every metalcore band has been a titan, by the way. And another one, probably the last one for a while in this series I've done of bands that put out 3 albums in a short period of time, and then we haven't heard from them in like over 10 years. So I figured these would be pretty easy ones to put out, and they're all bands I enjoy. Be sure to check out Death Clock and It Dies Today for those other ones. But today we are doing Still Remains, which is one of the bands that got me into the golden age of metalcore, which was ironically introduced to me by somebody who was a bit of an elitist and would say like, no, man, I'm into the hardcore stuff. I like Norma Jean and Under Oath. And it's just like, dude, and of course, As I Lay Dying and Still Remains. And if I brought up Trivium, he'd be a dick about it. But it's like, dude, they all sound a little different, but they're all part of, not exactly part of the same scene, but a lot of them are part of that similar feel, with the exception of Under Oath and Norma Jean. Those were like more mainstream hardcore or whatever bands. But anyway, that's a grievance towards one of my old friends. Thank you to him for getting me into Still Remains, because at the time, I think it was 2005 when I was really starting to get into some of this heavier material, like Killswitch Engage, Trivium, Still Remains. I forgot where we were driving, but like he would put on Of Love and Lunacy, and as soon as I heard that first track, To Live and Die by Fire, I was hooked. And that's kind of the history. And then, throughout, small period between that and, I don't know, 2012, I listened to the other albums kind of on again, off again. And when their last album had come out, I'd only listened to a few tracks, but I was mostly familiar with their first 2 tracks and not so much with their latest from 2013. So I had to really, refamiliarize myself with a few things. But one of their albums is very important to me and very sentimental to me. And we're going to see how that plays out in the ranking. Unlike the other ones I've done, though, the spread is still, pretty close. And no album really craps on the other ones, but it was pretty obvious what the best one was. And while the bottom 2 were essentially tied for a while, I've listened to them enough for a while to figure out, I know which one has the edge. So let's go ahead and get into it, and then I'll finish off with my top 10 songs from Still Remains. So at the very bottom spot, we have their most recent album, Ceasing to Breathe, which I was hoping would place higher. But when stacked up against the other two have their own pros. It's hard to compete with nostalgia, but also tone. Ceasing to Breathe has some great elements to it. It sounds pretty damn heavy. They veered away from, drop C and drop D and, played drop A sharp for some of the songs. Some of the metalcore and some of the heavy, some of the groove and the chunk and the thrash sounded a little like Parkway Drive, like their Deep Blue or their Atlas albums, just the tone and the way that, sorry, I don't have their names on hand, but the vocalist would like growl on this album. Kind of reminded me of Parkway Drive a little bit. But in songs like, I think, Close to the Grave or Bare Your Teeth. But yeah, here's the thing about Ceasing to Breathe. It's probably, at least compared to the middle album, which it's basically tied with, Ceasing to Breathe is pretty consistent. There's really no weak tracks on this album except for the title track. It's not my favorite song, but the rest of the album's pretty great. When it had come out, I had only listened to the song or the single Crone, but that's actually one of the weaker tracks on the album. It just sounds way too again crunchy, and while the rest of the music sounds good and the heavy sounds good, the breakdowns sound good, it just doesn't have this same emotional hooks in me or the same potency that their mid-2000s releases had. I mean, yes, it was a great comeback album. There was a 6-year gap between this and their second album, but they did come back and do something great. And it by no means it sucked. It by no means sucked. Again, the spread is between an 8.5 to an 8.7 between these three albums. Ceasing to Breathe, the best songs on the album are Kane and Close to the Grave, and then I love the riffs in FFI. Hopeless is also solid, and so is Bitter Shroud Repentance. But really nothing north of an 8.8 on any songs, nothing excellent, nothing life-changing, and nothing nostalgic here. But it is a consistently good album, and I can listen to it pretty easily. I don't know how often I would listen to it outside of doing this ranked and reviewed video, but overall, it was a great comeback album, but it just it just didn't have the potency or the power that the first two had. But it is technically tied with the middle album, although I'm going to give the middle album the edge, and that is their first album of Love and Lunacy. Now, you might be wondering, okay, it sounded like you were talking some smack about Ceasing to Breathe. What are you going to do with Love and Lunacy, this album that apparently gripped you and changed your life? Well, it wasn't the album, it was the song To Live and Die by Fire. There's no turning back now. Just that fucking riff, that da 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 da, and then da 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 da, just metalcore guitar riffs, and then that freaking the synthesizers, everything in the background. Which, by the way, I think musically speaking, Ceasing to Breathe is probably their best album. It just didn't have the same production quality and power that an album like Of Love and Lunacy had. That had that loud mid-2000s metalcore sound that did not sound raw. It sounded polished. It sounded great, and I loved that. But anyway, if every song on Of Love and Lunacy was about as good as the first track, Of Love and Lunacy would have ran away with this thing. But the problem with Of Love and Lunacy is it kind of blows its load on the first half of the album. The back half is kind of slowed down and weak until you get to Blossom the Witch, which is a great closing track. But basically from Cherished to Stare and Wonder, there's still great songs, but nothing to write home about. But the good news is they came out swinging hard with the first 5 tracks. Their main single, Worst Is Yet to Come, which is kind of your metal by numbers metalcore track with the tremolo picking, and then the C minor scale. But it is a catchy song, and it is very indicative of the time, the mid-2000s golden age of metalcore. In Place of Hope is another great song. White Walls, same deal. I love the piano work and the chorus. My other favorite song on this album is Bliss. Gave that one a 9 out of 10. I've always enjoyed that one. No, it's like a shotgun, ready it up. Just such an iconic chorus. Almost as iconic as To Live and Die by Fire. So yeah, you got the nostalgia there. You got the better top tracks. Their best songs are technically on this album. It overall sounds great. It sounds much better. Even though Ceasing to Breathe did have some happy sounding songs, like I think Beacon and Kane sounding, C minor. Of Love and Lunacy, the entire album is in drop C, which is, as heavy as that tuning is, it's also a very happy one. So Of Love and Lunacy does depict more hope and uplifting sounds, so it is a happier sounding album if that's what you're looking for in your metal music. Even if it's super heavy with the breakdowns and everything, this will do that for you. And again, the only cons are, if you are nitpicking, it is a pretty generic sounding album, and it is front loaded. But for 2005, this was a very potent release, and with some of the best tracks on here, basically squashing everything else, it was enough to give this album the middle spot pretty comfortably. If they didn't have those top tracks, this would have easily been their worst album, and if they had maintained the momentum of the front album, or the front half of the album, this could have easily been their best album, but it wasn't. What is their best album? It's their second one, The Serpent, which initially, when I heard it, when it had come out, or I heard at least Stay Captive, I was like, what the fuck happened to this band? They're not heavy anymore. You don't ever judge an album off of a single. I think Stay Captive, I believe it's all clean vocals. So if you just watch the music video, you thought, okay, this band's sold out, they suck now. I was wrong. I was immature. In 2011 and especially 2012, I listened to this album from front to back 1,000 times. I have a lot of memories to this album. It was one of the major soundtracks to my trip to Europe back then. And I purposely did that because the first time I listened to this album a lot was in 2011 when I was going through a breakup with my friend group. So there were some negative emotions there. So I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to this album from front to back 1,000 times while I'm in Europe so that I can make new memories and have more positive associations to it. And did it work? Mostly. But, you know, I haven't really listened to this album in like 8 or 9 years. So how did it hold up after all this time? It still sounds great. It has the consistency of Ceasing to Breathe with no weak tracks, but it has a couple of excellent songs on here, like, you know, high quality songs like Of Love and Lunacy. Yes, this is a more melodic album, but it's still a heavy fucking album. I mean, Avalanche is one of their heaviest songs, and if you're a huge Final Fantasy VII fan like I am, you love that there's a song called Avalanche with thematic lyrics about Final Fantasy VII. And again, Avalanche is a reference to the not eco-terrorist group that they're known as, but the eco-freedom fighters, I guess. But other songs are heavy too. I mean, Wax Walls, Empty Room, I mean, those are metalcore riffs throughout that. There's double bass drumming, and, you know, Anemia in Your Sheets is heavy. So is Undesired Reunion is another one of my favorite songs. It goes back and forth between the melodic and the heavy pretty well. I'm trying to find another heavy song. Overall, this is actually a softer album. Stay Captive, like, the music is heavier, but there's just a lot more clean vocals, but they sound good. The pianos are well written, the clean guitars are done well. Maria's a, you know, heartfelt song. Drop from the Cherry Tree, like, the metalcore riffs on this album just sound groovier and they sound more original. So you can't call The Serpent a generic album by any means. I actually think it's one of the most original sounding albums I've ever heard. And then, yes, they do have some, like, late mid-2000s, like, alternative emo nods here and there with songs like Dancing with the Enemy, which is a catchy song, a lot of emphasis on the synthesizers and everything. That is a great song. River Song is heavier. Sleepless Nights Alone is kind of like one of your more uplifting not power ballads, but like just happier sounding, like, not radio rock, but I sound like I'm losing my grip here. But at any rate, The Serpent just easily, you know, wins this because it's the most nostalgic for me, but also it's just a very good, well-rounded album. It's a very unique album, and it does please the metal fans who enjoy the melodies, enjoy the heavy, and The Serpent, the actual opening track, the intro track, it's excellent. The guitar work and just like the synthesizer, like, it's a great intro. So from start to finish, The Serpent is just an excellent experience as an album. But I gave it an 8.7 out of 10. So let's recap from least favorite to most favorite, even though they're all great albums. Ceasing to Breathe, Of Love and Lunacy, and The Serpent. Top 10 tracks are White Walls, Wax Walls, Empty Room, Close to the Grave, Stay Captive, Kane, The Worst Is Yet to Come, An Undesired Reunion, Avalanche, Bliss, and To Live and Die by Fire is absolutely their best track, hands down. I think that's 4 tracks off of their first 2 albums and then 2 tracks off of their last album. So thanks for watching, guys. Definitely subscribe. If you've heard of Still Remains or you listened to them back in the day in high school or whatever, like when I did, I listened to this band a lot when I was a teenager, but I still enjoy them. Let me know what you agree with and disagree with. How would you change it? And be sure to check out the Ranked and Reviewed channel on my playlist. I'm going to be doing a lot more of those coming up. You know, stay woke, stay metal, and have a great day.